I really enjoy playing retro games, but I have to admit I don't really miss some aspects of them. And in this video I'll go through 4 things I really don't miss from old games. In many ways I find old games more enjoyable experiences than their modern counterparts, but it still isn't all roses when the nostalgia fades away and you experience the product as it is. So, I finally greenlit this video because my previous video where I went through reasons why old games were better didn't flop as hard after all as I first thought. It got little wind to its sails after 3 months or so on YouTube, so here we go. Probably the worst offender in old games was this very unfair habit that if and when you failed in a boss fight, the game sent you all the way back to the beginning of the level. This was common practice in 8 and 16-bit eras, especially the 8-bit era. I'm getting some NES nightmares right now writing this. These bosses didn't F around, they punched you straight back to where you belonged, at the beginning of the level. I find this particularly annoying when you finally reach the boss of the level and you are on your last legs and he or she flattens you in under 3 seconds because you are on your last legs and have zero practice on the boss fight itself. And here comes the actual problem. To get any practice on that boss, you have to beat the level again before the boss, before getting another chance on the boss. You might not actually even make it this time to the boss. Usually, these games also had a limited amount of lives and continues, which leads to my next point. So, you failed at that boss a couple of times, and now your skills are degrading due to frustration, and all those extra lives you have gathered during the game are starting to go down to 0, and when they finally do, the game gives you another chance. You can continue few times. There's a catch though. The boss at the end of the level was probably the end of the world force level 4. Now you have to go through all the levels on world 4 again, without your extra lives and possibly power-ups. The challenge is now greater than ever. You waste all 3 of your continues. Yeah, you'll get 3 extra chances if the game is generous. Some games were generous enough to have infinite continues. Editor Gamer here. Should I make a video about the best game over screens? Would you watch that? Now you are on your last continue and last life. You die. Now you have 2 options. Go back to the very beginning of the game or turn the system off. I usually turned the system off and went outside to eat sand. Of course, some games had save features even back then, or some sort of password feature to skip the game roughly to the point where you were. But even if you used a password to skip and without extra lives and power-ups. Also, some of those passwords were real pain in the ass. I know the technical reasons now why some of them had to be so long and complicated. It was because if the game says some sort of statistics about your character or gear, for example, it had to be represented on that password. They didn't make them long and annoying just to be dicks about it. Of course, you could easily alleviate these issues by using emulators, even official ones, and save states or even recently more popular rewind features. I use them too, because my time on this planet is limited. It saves time and also gamer rage is kept under control. That being said, these features weren't possible back then when we played these games, and still aren't if you really want to play as they were intended. Some even argue if you use these modern features to beat these old games, it doesn't count. You really didn't legit beat the game if you use save states or rewind features. In the end, it's up to you. I appreciate my time and sanity more than someone else's approval of how I enjoy my entertainment. Even though I really like the 7th generation of games, and especially PS3 as a system, the one thing I don't miss is the piss poor frame rates that plagued this generation of console games. Also, 5th gen, lots of games suffered from horrendous frame rates, especially N64, and one such game is some less known little title called The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time that runs blazing 20 FPS on the system. I have to say though, I prefer unlocked frame rates instead of locked 30 FPS when the game in question can mostly hold it around 60 FPS. For example, Ninja Gaiden Sigma 2 targets 60 FPS and can keep it mostly around that. Only when you use this ability, when the screen fills with alpha transparencies, the poor PS3 here chokes up. But as I said, I'd rather take the hit here than play the whole game at 30 FPS. This one is kind of double-edged sword because it can be a good thing as well. Usually during the 5th generation of console gaming, you had to manually save your progress to your memory card at designated save points, and these could be very few and far between. For example, in Resident Evil games on the original PlayStation, you could only save your progress on these typewriters and even needed a special item, the ink ribbon, to do so. This means you couldn't always save, even if you stumbled on one because you either didn't have ink ribbons on you because the inventory space was so limited, or you just saved them because the item itself was limited in quantity. Failure meant going back pretty far in some cases. Even though this adds some tension to the game, I really don't miss this very much. Even modern Resident Evil titles force this on you at higher difficulties. Some find it nostalgic, I find it annoying. I mentioned it can be a good thing too. Yes, it can. For example, when you can actually load a previous save game without the game constantly overwriting it, you can experiment with your resources in the game. Back then you could test different cars in Gran Turismo games and their tunes, and if it wasn't good for what you tried to do, you could just load the save and try another. That's not possible these days when the game saves your decision automatically as soon as you buy the car. Some games still have the option to go back to different manual save points, like in the Resident Evil 4 remake, which at lower difficulties offer the best of both worlds. Manual saves at typewriters you can rotate and go back to, and still have auto-saving checkpoints, make it less annoying when you inevitably fail. There you go, 4 things I really don't miss from older games. I think they are overall better games for a myriad of reasons than the modern games, but nothing's perfect. And if you want to hear my reasons why old games are better than the new ones, go watch this video on your screen now. Thank you.